Assalamu alaikum, everyone. We're just waiting for a couple of minutes so that everyone can join, and then we will officially begin. Thank you, Hashir. We're so glad you could join. Um, in the meanwhile, I think we're waiting for people to join. I can just share a few housekeeping rules. In case anyone has a question, we've got a Q&A box here at the bottom. You can use that to send in your questions. If you want to ask a question live to our guest, you can just click on the raise hand option, and towards the end of the session we've got a 15-minute Q&A time allocated, so you can ask your questions during that time, and I'll unmute you and you can ask your question directly to our guest. Otherwise, during the discussion, if you've got any question, please use the Q&A box to type it in, and we'll be happy to take it towards the end of the session. We are just going to wait just another minute and then we'll start. Hi, Saima. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here. Shall I think we can start, and we can, anyone else who's joining can just join us as we go on. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I hope you're all doing well and you had a great week so far. Welcome to the 11th episode of Career Conversations, and I'm really glad you could join us today. For those of you who've joined us for the first time, I'm Amna and I head all things digital at Kamai. Kamai is a recruitment startup based out of Lahore, and we're working towards making hiring faster, easier, and reliable. So our team launched this web series in order to facilitate conversations around all aspects of one's career, as well as the workplaces that we're all part of. So in today's episode, we're discussing a topic that is now gaining a lot of traction, not just globally, but here in Pakistan as well. While we've seen a lot of blog posts and books and articles on the topic, but we have a very, very special guest today who will help us all understand the concept of diversity, equity, inclusion, and allyship at the workplace. And while we're at it, we'll also ask her, how does one go about incorporating these principles into their daily work lives as well as the workplaces that they're part of? So without waiting any longer, I'll introduce my guest to all of you. Asma Yusuf, who is currently the head of employee experience for Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka at Unilever, and she is also the diversity and inclusion lead there. Asma has had a spectacular career so far, and she's been working for over 13 years across markets in Pakistan and abroad in areas of HR, diversity and inclusion, and communications. And Asma will definitely share a bit more about her journey. Thank you so much, Asma. Assalamu alaikum. And I'm really glad you could join us today and you've taken the time out of a very busy schedule.
Oh, thank you so much. I hope everyone can see me and hear me okay. Thank you
Yes.
for this opportunity. It's definitely a topic that you did mention is gaining a lot of traction, but I think it's also something which has become a non-negotiable and also something really close
Absolutely.
to my heart and a big passion. So thank you for the opportunity. And yeah, let's get started.
Yeah, we absolutely look forward to learning a lot from you today. So before we dive into the topic, and this is the sort of thing that we ask all our guests. So before we dive into what diversity and all of those things are, could you share a little with our audience a little about your career journey so far, what all you worked on, the causes you've championed, and what has sort of your career trajectory looked like over the last decade or so?
Sure. I started my career as a management consultant, and this was in 2006. And I joined management consulting, HR management consulting, because I had studied psychology, I had studied women's studies. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to get into. But I think what working in consulting did for me is it gave me the opportunity to work with a number of amazing organizations, did recruitment for them, assessment centers, understood the cultures, understood the people. And, 2 years into that role, I did receive a call from Unilever, and I had worked with them before in the space of consulting, and they were offering me a role in their recruitment team. So I jumped on the opportunity because recruitment is something I really enjoy doing. Working with people was great, and Unilever as an organization is a beautiful organization to work for. So I said, you know what, let's dive straight into it. From then onwards, the journey has been primarily in HR, has been a beautiful journey. I've done a number of roles, had a number of great experiences in Pakistan's market and, abroad as well. And I think what's just been the main driver in every role that I've done, whether it was in communications, whether it was in HR, whether it was Pakistan, Singapore, London, what's just been great is that every role I've done has given me a real sense of purpose. That's what's kept me going. I think the whole diversity and inclusion piece really kicked in a big way when I joined the sustainable business and communications role at Unilever. Our chairperson at the time, Shazia, she had a big agenda where she really, really wanted to be the leader to drive women empowerment across Pakistan. So not just in Unilever, but beyond, and really build a structured network, where we could understand what are the barriers, of holding women back in the workplace. What can we do as organizations, as the private sector, as public sector? How can partnerships come in? And how can we really, really do more to bring about inclusion across the country? Her vision wasn't only bringing in women and increasing that. It was all about bringing in, men and women from different socioeconomic backgrounds, focusing on the disabled members of our community, focusing on the other minorities, transgender, and just, because that's what true inclusion is, right? So making sure that that all comes into play. And since then, our journey in the space of diversity and inclusion has been a great one. We've managed to, I think, work with a lot of different organizations, partnered with a lot of NGOs. We've partnered with UN Women. We partnered with Akuat in Lahore for a whole transgender, inclusion piece. On the part, where we looked at the disability agenda, we've partnered with STEPS, now PDP, and just really, making and now we're partnering with, an increased number of universities so that the talent that we bring in is not just from the, typical schools that we generally used to hire from. And this all, also now translates into a few years later into our current CEO's vision, which is Unilever for Pakistan, where, his vision, Amir Paracha's vision, is to, try and map the mix of the country in terms of the country's diversity into the mix that should exist at an organization. But of course, want to keep reiterating that this is not something we've done alone as a company. It's been a lot of other great organizations. We've worked very closely with Telenor, Nestle, a lot of local companies as well, to understand what are their best practices, how can we learn from them, how can we share ours, and how can we really just build towards an inclusive Pakistan. So, that's
And
kind of been my journey, and yeah, excited to keep scaling it up.
thank you for walking us through that. It's wonderful to hear all of that you've accomplished so far, be it just yourself or in collaboration with others. So, just a supplementary question here. Things might have drastically changed, or the speed of change would have been faster during the last couple of years compared to when you started, because at that point, I don't think this was such an important cause that people generally themselves even championed.
So I think, I think it's always been an important cause. I think it's always been there, especially for, I guess, global companies. It's always been there as part of the bigger global purpose. But what's really nice now is that a lot of local companies are starting to understand the need for diversity. And I think what's changed in the last couple of years is that people have realized, companies have realized, that diversity doesn't only mean bringing more women into the workplace. It means bringing in, like I was mentioning, diverse talent, men and women from different walks of life, different thoughts, different organizations, from the minorities, from different, provinces. It's all about bringing in that mix, because when you have a mix of people, you have a mix of thought, and that actually leads to success at an organization. And yes, of course, there have been a lot of studies globally, locally, that say that, and this all started with saying that, if you do add more women into your work streams, there is a stronger business case for the company doing better. But again, that has now increased. That's actually now moved, like the needle's moved. And now it's more about bringing in that diversity, creating policies, creating infrastructures that allow these, mixes of people to actually thrive and survive. And, that's what makes for, a much more inclusive organization.
So, to put my first question to you, which was around understanding how does one go about defining D&I, particularly in relation to a workplace, and you've sort of given an overview. And like you mentioned, that more often than not, people's definition of diversity is only limited to having a couple of women as part of a team, and they think that's where the diversity initiative just ends. So you've had a lot of experience in the area, and you've led initiatives. So how do you describe D&I?
So I think, we used to call it DNI, which essentially, as per the acronym, stood for diversity and inclusion. But what now, the new acronym has become is EDNI, which essentially stands for equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I think it's really important that this initial definition has been enhanced, because if you just want a really basic understanding of how, the three come together, it's simply diversity standing for who all is at the table. Inclusion is basically, do they all feel like they belong? And that's what we've been focusing on, for the last few years, that who's at the table and do they feel that they belong? Where equity comes in is understanding the barriers that actually come in the way to getting to and staying at that table. It's very easy to have a mix of talent and change a few policies and, the infrastructure to allow for these individuals to come in. but it's very, very important today to understand what are the challenges that they faced to actually get to where they did, and what are actually the barriers that may come in the way to getting them to actually stay at the table. And I think that is what is really, really important, because that is where all your retention comes in. That's where your sustainability piece comes in. And that is how you see the success of bringing in these inclusive practices. So I think it's really important to understand that the definition does need to be enhanced to include all three aspects of this definition. I hope
Yes,
that
because
answers.
I think, yeah, one of the things that I've observed is that uh, people usually confuse diversity and inclusion. And what they fail to understand is that they're parts of a whole strategy. So, if someone says they have a diverse workforce, that may mean, all right, they've got people from different genders or different backgrounds coming in. But if those diverse people don't have or aren't having their voices heard and their perspectives included in the business strategy, then you're not completing the equation. And that is probably what inclusion is. And then when you go a step ahead and you ensure that everyone has a chance, has an equal chance at everything, that is where equity comes in, right? Asma, I think we can't hear you. I think Asma's video connection or internet has some issue. So we can just wait for her to join back. So we'll just wait for her to join back. All right. Can you hear us, Asma?
Yeah, I think I got dropped off for a few seconds. Sorry
Yeah.
about
No, that's
yeah.
all right. That's the thing with virtual events these days.
Our
But anyway,
electricity actually went at the office. I think that's what, so it took a couple of seconds. Sorry about that.
yeah,
Okay,
no,
where
no,
were we?
no worries. So basically, I was trying to just help break this down a little. So if an organization says we're diverse, that means they've got people from different backgrounds at their organization. But if those people don't have their voices as part of business strategy or their perspectives included into business strategy, then you're sort of not completing the equation.
Yeah.
And that is what inclusion is, ensuring that they have a voice and they have their perspective included. And then equity would be going a step ahead and ensuring that all of these people have an equal chance at everything.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. So I think this next question will be slightly, you might find it broad, but where do you think Pakistani organizations at the moment stand in terms of these initiatives? And I'd love to hear about any experiences you've had in sort of when you decided to implement such a change at an organization, or you had to deal with a complex situation.
Sure. So I think, I think we're doing quite well as a nation. I think we're a nation that's got a really great mix of people. I think there's a lot more women, who are achieving higher education these days. I think there's a lot more opportunities. I think our universities and schools are also now, adjusting their infrastructure to enable, a person with a disability to, attend something that, couldn't happen before. Simple things like ramps are now, readily
Mm.
available in most universities, schools, even restaurants, etc. So it is a country which is becoming a lot more aware of the need of, bringing in more inclusivity. I think there are a lot of NGOs as well in Pakistan who are working in this space. We have public sector, private sector, and NGOs all kind of working together on this piece of work. And I think specifically organizations in Pakistan are starting to really do some great work in the space. So, in early days, what used to happen was it was just the global multinationals that used to get this vision from their global teams, and it's something that they had to implement. And it used to be a little bit of a tick mark exercise, but now it's something which is very much integrated into the business case of organizations in Pakistan. As part of Unilever, I've led some of these initiatives in the space of diversity and inclusion. But what's been really great for me is the opportunity to partner with other organizations and learn, in terms of what they're doing and how they're excelling, and just do best practice sharing. We've partnered with Telenor in the past, and they've done some amazing work with, the disability piece. They've got a really great, trainee program called Open Mind, and they bring in members of the disabled community, persons with disabilities from Pakistan. They train them, they give them exposure to different functions, and they rotate them. And then, based on their performance and opportunity, they get confirmed into permanent roles. This is an amazing model, something that, they're basically pioneering. And we learn so much from them in terms of small steps we need to take to actually make our workspaces more adaptable. Nestle has done some great work in terms of empowering women in rural. We've had a chance to, speak to them about their program. We have a similar program called the Gutti Baji program that focuses on economic empowerment for, women in the rural parts of Pakistan. And then you have your local companies who also really are working towards, making headway in this space. Jazz has a really good program to bring about financial inclusion for women. We've worked with, some NGOs. The partnerships with them have been great. Akuwa does some great work with the whole transgender, giving them employment. We've got now PDP and STEPS who really help in the space of, disability. And UN Women has been great in terms of giving us access to, areas of, bringing in policy change when it comes to domestic violence, harassment at the workplace, making sure that the sustainable development goals are integrated as part of our, ecosystem. So a lot of great organizations. We're doing some great work with the State Bank of Pakistan as well, to understand how we can partner with them to bring about financial inclusion. So, it's not just something, it's not just a flavor of the month or a flavor of the day anymore, something that only global companies drive. It's happening all over. Local companies, smaller companies, startups, they're all understanding the need of bringing in diverse and inclusive, practices and talent, and then making policy changes and making infrastructural changes to make that whole process sustainable. So definitely, I've seen a lot of, great changes coming in Pakistan, and hoping that the more we keep sharing and the more we keep collaborating, this magic just keeps spreading. And inshallah, one day we will be in even much more inclusive Pakistan. So,
hopefully, yes. So you've described, and I think the one thing that I've understood is that there is policy buy-in from managers at all levels in a lot of organizations. And that is something that's critical to actually driving these initiatives, right? So in terms of when we talk about the barriers, so what do you see are the key barriers that we have in Pakistan at the moment that relating specifically to the DEI initiatives at the workplace? And why are some companies hesitant, or they're not understanding the importance of it, or they're just reluctant to introduce them?
Look, I think there's just a few things that enable bringing in such a change. The biggest one being mindset, right? You need to understand the mindset for this change, and only then will a change like this be implementable and successful. Mindset is not something that changes overnight. It's part of it's part of the culture, and bringing about a change in culture does take some time. So it's important to be patient when you're rolling out something like this. It's important to state the reason as to why you're bringing in a change. It's important to have the leadership buy-in, and it's important for D&I initiatives to be not just a business priority, but a cross-functional priority. So it can't keep being something that only HR and the comms team continue running, which has been the case for the most part. All the functions need to be equally invested. So your marketing team, your sales team, your finance team, HR, like every function end to end needs to be equally invested in this process, because that needs to spread across the organization. And yes, leadership buy-in is important because they are in, leaders of organizations are obviously in the positions of making decisions, and they're the ones who actually uphold the culture of the organization. So it's important to understand the why, right? And it's it's really important to explain the how of how we're going to bring about that change, and then what it's going to translate to. So I think the only barriers are that sometimes the mindset doesn't exist, leadership buy-in is not there, and it's not a cross-functional priority. But once you get past those three barriers, anything is possible. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, you pretty much answered my next question as well, because I was going to ask if it's just a single department's responsibility to roll out these initiatives and have them implemented, but that's actually each one of us who is part of that whole organization. Each one of us is responsible for ensuring that our colleagues feel safer, they're welcome, and if there's anything that's hindering their performance, we're all there to help them. So it's a collective effort primarily.
Yeah.
So but since the effort will have to be led by the HR department, right? So you've been part of that function that would initiate or lead the entire effort, and then end up convincing everyone else on the team that this is something that's important and has to be done. So do you think that rolling out these initiatives has had a positive impact on organizations, and they've actually felt that play throughout the organization or the workplace?
Yeah, definitely, because everyone does want to work in an organization that welcomes change, it welcomes inclusion, and it welcomes diversity of thought. Because whether you're a man or a woman, or you're from a minority community, or you're from a different province, you have a voice, and you want that voice to be heard, right? And so the more open to diversity that your organization is, the more chances you have of your voice being heard. So I think it's something that people do appreciate. I think when you bring in, like I said at the start, when you bring in people from different walks of life, different socioeconomic backgrounds, you come out of your bubble of what you're used to. You understand how different people live. You understand how different people think. This can help you understand, your consumers. You can understand your customers. And it also just makes for much more effective business, because at the end of the day, organizations do need to run their businesses, but need to do it with an inclusive understanding of, are their products going to the right people? Are they going far and wide? And what are people saying? And it's not just a sample of people that you need to hear from. You have to hear it from everyone end to end.
Yeah.
And so I think, yeah, definitely when we've rolled out these initiatives, look, they haven't always been easy. When we rolled out the whole transgender inclusion initiative at our organization, we did have to go through a very, very, structured training, sensitization for all of our employees, head office, sales offices, factories, to explain to them, what it meant to be a transgender, why they were equally as part of our community as you and I, why we were even taking the step to give them these opportunities and to actually break that taboo that they're actually also very skilled. A lot of them have gone to universities. All they need is that opportunity. And as an organization in Pakistan, we owe them that opportunity, like we owe it to all members of the community. But it doesn't happen easy. It's not like we did not have any questions. It's not like we didn't have any opposition. But once and that is why the most important part before starting any sort of rollout where change is going to come in, you have to raise the awareness, you have to communicate effectively, you have to make your employees understand why you are doing what you're doing. And only then do they get more engaged, do they get more involved, and only then will that change actually be a success. You can't just jump straight into an activity and say, oh, I need to hire X number of women this year and let's do it no matter what it takes, because that's not the way change, comes in.
Yeah.
Sure, it'll come in, but you won't be able to sustain it. Yeah.
So, Asma, you mentioned that, for example, it was even difficult for an organization of your size and the amount of resources that you had at your disposal. So, conducting trainings and taking the time to actually interact with each individual in your organization whom it may have impacted. So when we talk about organizations that don't have that like that sort of resources at their disposal, how do you think they can start this conversation in their organizations?
Very simply through collaborations and partnerships. It doesn't cost that much to do all of this. Everyone who I've worked with in terms of organizations have been very open in sharing their best practices. Telenor was really good about talking to us in detail about their Open Mind program. In fact, we also met their trainees. So I think you just have to keep an eye out. You have to leverage your network. You need to keep yourself up to date in terms of what organizations are doing what, and simply connect with them, partner with them. And it doesn't even have to be an official partnership. Just connect with them and say, look, I'm interested in hearing about this initiative that you rolled out. How did you do it? What were the challenges? How was it a success? Do you mind if we roll something similar out in our organization? And nobody's going to say no, because every time an organization does something in the space of ED&I, it leads to, that change rolling across, and that's how the magic spreads. So just keep connecting, keep sharing best practices. And for instance, when we roll out initiatives, we're more than happy to share them with anyone and everyone who, reaches out, because if somebody can take what we've learned and already rolled out and roll it out in their organization and create impact, there's nothing more value adding than that, right? So
yeah, and do you think universities can play a very important role here? So because since most of the companies, their supply or their sourcing starts from a university, and if the university is paying a lot of attention to such initiatives and they're sensitizing students from a very early age, so by the time they move into an organization, they'll already have that knowledge. And so even if they're going into a smaller organization, they're starting their own initiative, or they become part of a very big organization, so they bring that wo jo aap mindset ki baat kar rahi thi. So that is something that we can start changing very early on.
Yes, 100%. I think they definitely play a very key role. Those are like formative years. You're studying before you move into your next job, into your first job rather. So I think it's really important that universities, have some trainings on, diversity and inclusion, the role it plays in organizations. Because whether you move into a corporate, whether you move into the public sector, whether you move into, an NGO, this will be something like, this will be knowledge that you take with you through and through. And I don't think such an education will necessarily mean that you become part of a diversity and inclusion agenda or process, but it will just expand your mind and make you a more inclusive human being. And that is important to even accept change. So you don't only need to be the one driving the change, you need to also be open to accept it. And so I think if universities could mandate, some courses or some kind of exposure to the importance of diversity and inclusion in the workspace, I think that would really, really help.
All right, perfect. So another concept, I think we're going to be running out of time soon, that I wanted to talk about was the concept of allyship, which is very, very new to the Matrix. And I think it's only grown popular in the last couple of years, very, very recent. Um, and we know that there's men in workplaces who have stronger say in decision making. That's traditionally been the case. And that is the case as well, even in terms of changing perception. So someone who has more power or influence, they are in a very good position to lead that change or to sort of manifest that behavior that everyone else can follow. So speaking in terms of someone who is from the HR function, does the sort of concept of allyship, has it been included in organizational values and goals, or are organizational leaders actually looking towards fostering this behavior among their employees? And just before we move into sort of answering that question, just to clarify, um, ally, I am referring to a person who is actively sort of promoting the culture of inclusion, and who's taking intentional or making a very conscious effort to take people together with him or her. And this could be anyone. Women leaders can be actionable allies to minority groups, and men can be allies to women, and able-bodied people can be allies to differently abled ones. Economically privileged ones can be allies to those who are not. So, privilege is something that is intersectional, and all of us at some point can be an ally to another person. So, are companies actually working towards fostering this sort of culture in their organizations, and are they taking any actionable steps to encourage this behavior?
Yeah, so definitely. Of course, it's a new thing, a new concept, like you rightly pointed out.
Yeah.
But it all links back to whenever you want to drive a big change, it needs to be top driven. Yes, the whole organization needs to be invested and engaged, but it does need to be top driven, and it really does help if you basically drive it through the whole concept of this leader is going to be responsible for leading this change, and so on and so forth. So for instance, when we had our previous female CEO, she drove a lot of policies, she drove a lot of infrastructural changes, and a lot of great work to empower women in the workplace. Oh. Someone's saying there's no sound. I think we're good.
I can hear you.
Okay.
I think, yeah.
Okay, great. So it's definitely very important. It's definitely important to have, that go-to person. What we are currently doing at our organization is we have assigned different leaders to be the face of our different initiatives, and they're the ones who we basically partner with to take the different initiatives forward. So there'll be one leader who's got a cross-functional team in place, and this is all on volunteer basis. It's not like these have been assigned, and that's how it has to be, because that's how the passion comes in. Yes, it's mandated as something we all need to play our part in, but so the different leaders are leading in different spaces. One is leading the initiatives for women, one is leading the initiative for the transgender piece, one is leading the differently abled agenda, and one is leading the space in, say, inclusive hiring. So it's really important to have that face of representation, because that does really help you get in that way. Also, I think the other thing is, it's important to also bring, when you look at just the piece on women, it's very important to bring men into the conversation as well. We've there's a global movement called He for She. And what that talks about is, how men need to be part of the conversation to drive change when it comes to, policies and processes relating to women, because they are, big sector of the workplace. They are in decision-making positions, and they do deal with women from time to time, whether it's their colleagues, their moms, their siblings, their wives, their children, whatever the case, because it's important to have both genders, men and women, into the conversation when you're trying to build a process or a policy towards just for women as well. So definitely need to have that in place. But more than having allies in place, it's all the more important to communicate that. Yeah, because having
Yeah.
those allies in place is one thing, but you need to communicate that so everybody's aware and feeling engaged about the fact, because it's very inspiring when that your manager is basically responsible for owning the space in in the space of the differently abled hiring. So definitely super important, and it really helps drive that change as well.
Right. And are there any particular KPIs that we can associate with ED&I measures, or what would a success metric look like?
Look, I mean, there's a lot of KPIs that one could bring in, but see, like the thing is, something like a mindset change cannot be measured
Yeah,
by,
absolutely.
a number. Yes, you have engagement surveys, and you've got, surveys you can roll out to your population, where you basically, you can say, oh, do you think that your current organization is inclusive? And people can say yes, or people can say no, but that doesn't really give you 100% sample of what people are thinking. Yes, metrics should be in place. Yes, there should be percentages assigned in terms of a vision or a target. And yes, the company should work towards that. But I think you also need to focus equally on the softer side, right? To make sure that the infrastructure is there to actually enable inclusion. You have to make sure that people are not feeling discriminated against. You need to make sure that engagement is there. And those things you can't always measure with KPIs or metrics. But that's the thing about a initiative like this. It's based on mindset and awareness and presentation. Sorry. Anyways, there's so yeah, I think definitely you can put some KPIs in place. I don't know what that question refers to, but there's no PowerPoint presentation. We're just having
Yeah,
a
I think
chat, but yeah.
she means that we should have had a presentation to probably record all of these points. So, Saima, once the conversation is over, our team will extract the important aspects of this conversation, and we'll be sharing them on our social media as well. And we'll be happy to email those to you. So in case you've missed anything, you can definitely rewatch the episode on our YouTube and Facebook as well. So yeah, I hope that helps. Also, we're now open to any questions that you all may have. You can drop them in the Q&A box, and if you want to ask them live, you can just click on the raise hand button and I'll unmute you so you can ask your question directly from our guest. So while we wait for the questions, I had another question that I think will help us move towards wrapping up the session as well. What can each one of us as individuals do, or if I'm a sort of function lead, what can I do in my capacity? If I've just started in an organization, what can I do in my capacity to sort of start building a culture of inclusivity in the organization that we're at? Because like you rightly pointed out, it's not one person who's going to be leading it, but you can absolutely play a very critical role in starting that conversation in your organization?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? You're
Yeah,
talking
so I
about
meant,
behavior change?
yeah, so if I'm an individual, what can I do at an individual level to promote, if say my organization isn't really big on such initiatives, right? But I'm part of an organization and I strongly feel for a cause. What are the sort of things that I can do to start a conversation or to bring my management's attention towards such causes? So, just basically initiating a conversation. Where would I start
Sure.
from?
So I think, you can start really small. You can basically pick up examples from other organizations, from things that you've read, from things that you've seen. What stands out to you the most? Because it's always more natural to pick up that one thing that really, really means the most to you and start with that, and then the rest can follow. So if, as a woman, you want to drive change for more female inclusive policies and practices at your organization, you start with that. You do some research, you connect with some of your colleagues in other organizations, understand their best practices, understand their struggles, really build your personal business case, and then take it to your management or take it to the relevant team, and explain to them the why, the how, and the what. Yeah, the why. Why do you think that we should do this? How do you think we'll do it, and what will it really have in terms of impact and value? And once you share that, you give some examples of how it was rolled out in other companies, how it worked, how it led to a culture change, how it
Hmm.
was a positive change, and yeah, you just take it from there. But yeah, you have to start small. You can't have 100 things on a list and say, you know what, I want to do this, that, the other. And
Hmm.
start small. It's a really beautiful journey, but it's not one that you can run through. You have to take small steps, because you also want to make sure they're the right steps. And every step you take, you will learn something amazing, which you can then share with others, and also
So Hashir
so I
has a
think.
question. Uh, he's saying, I work for an organization which is a retail fashion brand, and we have almost 100% males working at every role. So whenever I talk to the management regarding the D&I that will actually lead to productivity, they refrain from answering that. Please guide me on how to go, like sort of how can he play his part in including such initiatives? Because he's got a team that's
So
entirely male.
Right. So I think what you can do is, look, it's not easy. It's not easy to bring about change, like I said. And so what you need to do is really build a strong business case, like I was sharing, on why you believe that bringing in some females will actually lead to productivity. Because it is a retail fashion brand, and if the majority of your customers are female, it's important to have that representation there from the very start. Look up examples of other organizations in the same industry, in the same retail fashion space, who basically are really benefiting from having an inclusive workforce, and bring that to the table, because every time you bring just talking to the management or talking to your team doesn't always work, because again, look, it won't be a business priority unless you show them why it should be. And that's with every initiative. It's with every launch. It's with every change you want to bring in. It's with everything that you do. So you have to build that strong business case filled with examples of how and why it worked, and then basically say, and this is why I think that bringing something like this in. But you can't just go with like general ask. There have to be a number of successful examples from the relevant industry, and only then will your team buy in the concept of even exploring.
And I think one of the most effective things here can be how your competition in the market is actually adopted this
Yeah,
strategy and how they're being successful using it. So that
yeah,
is one thing that almost always works with the management कि अगर हमारी competition के लिए ये फायदेमंद है तो हमारे लिए भी हो सकता है. So I
yeah,
think that is one place that you can start. And in terms of resources, I think Asma even initially mentioned that there's organizations that are working particularly on this, and I'm sure they'll have a lot of resources that will help you build your case. I think you mentioned now PDP, you mentioned UN Women. So these are all the organizations that are working on bringing more inclusivity into the workplace. So you can even look those up and see if any resources can help you out with that. I think Asma, एक जो चीज आपने mention की थी that it's not a very easy journey being in this space, and you know it can become exhausting after a while, since your entire job is to reorganize a workplace that was most definitely not designed for everyone, right? So even the most inclusive workplaces, I think they have to reconfigure and readapt social as their societal changes, right? So do you think it can become emotionally draining, or if there is someone who wants to become part of this space and they want to continue working here, what would your advice be to them? कि उनको क्या करना चाहिए to avoid burnout, or something similar, or I can just avoid getting too exhausted?
I think the same thing. You have to keep yourself relevant. You have to keep yourself engaged. And you need to keep the things, it needs to keep moving. You can't be doing the same thing over and over. Because even in a job that you might be doing that you love, if you're constantly going to be doing the same thing every year, every day, after a while, it gets monotonous, it gets tiring. So that is why you basically really, really need to, in order to keep yourself relevant, keep reading, keep connecting, keep understanding what the best practices are, know who are the, just like if you're working in, a company that sells goods, you keep an eye out in terms of what's competition doing, what are the trends, what are they doing better than us, how can, our company do it. Same thing here. You need to keep checking, what are other companies doing, what are local companies doing, what are global companies doing, and how can I keep adding value and adding more to my existing strategy, because that's what keeps you going. That's what keeps you engaged when you're doing something different every day and you're adding value. So that would be my advice. Just keep yourself relevant and keep learning. And there's a lot of self-learning, by the way. No one's going to come and give you that
Yeah.
learning. There's a lot of self-learning, and that is definitely driven by passion.
Thank you for sharing that. I think we'll just take one final question. And there's two questions. They're almost similar, but I think I'll try to make sense of this. I think Saima and Naveed, they both want to know what sort of outreach does Unilever have in terms of universities? How do they ensure that the pool that they're picking from universities is diverse, or वो किस किस्म की policies हैं that can allow their fresh graduates to better take advantage of the opportunities that you have at your company? So she's saying companies like Nestle are constantly engaged in such inclusive activities, and they're sending all their campaigns and activities directly to universities and their graduates. So this is sort of related to, I think, Unilever as a company. And
yeah, sure. We've recently, a few years ago, so we have a management trainee program that used to be a paper-based test, and we used to go to different universities and do campus drives. And that's how we used to recruit our talent. And obviously, because we were physically going to all the universities, we were unable to get the reach that we wanted. So ever since we switched to the digital recruitment piece, where now all the applications, testing, interviews are all online. We've got a bit of psychometric testing as a part of it. There's video interviewing, and what that's done is it's opened up the application to anyone and everyone, really. So you could be in any part of the world, really, and be interested in applying, and you can do so. Now, even all of our regular opportunities besides the management trainee program are all available on our website. And there's no university filter, in any of that. I think the last 2 years when because of COVID, we couldn't even do any of our campus drives. I think that really equalized our hiring method. So I think that really helped us in attracting and having access to a lot more diverse talent because not having that campus drive format really allowed more people to apply. What we're also doing is we've recently, as of last year, been reaching out to a lot more universities, not
I think, Asma, your connection has sort of dropped again. We can't hear you.
traditional kind of applicants that we used to have in the past.
All right. I think, yeah, I will beach me. Your voice got interrupted, but I can hear you now. I hope, Saima, that Saima and Naveed, both, this answers your question. I think, Asma, आपकी internet में there's some issue, so I can't hear you properly. But we're also almost where our time is up. So we won't be taking any more questions now. Thank you everyone for joining us. And thank you, Asma, for being part of this conversation and sharing your experiences and wisdom with all of us. I'm sure it was a very enlightening session for me, and I'm sure it was the same for everyone who joined us. And we look forward to bringing more conversations such as these. And we hope that more people eventually can benefit from it. So yeah, I think, yeah, I can't hear Asma, so we will say goodbye here to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us. And we look forward to having you in our next conversation. Thank you, Nafiz. Okay, you're back. I was just wrapping up. I
I don't
thought
even know
कि
what was the last thing you heard. I gave a very long answer for the university piece. I hope that you managed to capture most of it.
yes, I did.
Mhm.
So which is why I was asking. I hope Asma and Naveed also got their answers because they were having a problem with listening to you. But I think they have their answers. So
Listen, by the
she's
way, if there are
just
any
saying
more, yeah, if there are any more questions after this, just write to me separately and we can work together to get the remaining questions
perfect. All
answered. That's
right.
fine.
Yeah, she's just shared a suggestion that it would be great if you could include universities from the Lahore region as well. I'm sure you're already at it and you will be working towards making this even more inclusive. So thank you, Asma. It was an absolute pleasure having you and speaking to you. And I personally learned a lot, and I'm sure all of our participants who joined us, they learned a lot. So thank you, and we look forward to hosting you again sometime soon whenever we're discussing anything similar.
No, thank you so much for this opportunity and thank you for all the wonderful questions. I think this is one of those areas where the more you talk to people, like I said, and the more suggestions that come in, the more you can improve and the more that you can scale up. And that's why I think
Absolutely.
conversations like this are really important. So thank you. Your team is doing a really great job in raising awareness about, all issues and mindsets. So thank you. Thanks a
Yeah,
lot.
no, thank you for being here. Thank you, Nafis.
Okay. Take care.
Have a good
Khuda
day.
Hafiz. You too. Bye.